Hidden Object Guru here with some games I sampled recently. As always, the score out of 10 is how interested I am in playing more of them in the future. Iron Guard VR. When I played Iron Guard, I found it to be a basic but competently crafted tower defense game with interesting locations and a good variety of enemies and towers. As is almost always the case, moving things into VR improved it immensely. Using the motion controllers to point and click on towers as well as control the support ship works better than it ever did in flat mode. And being able to casually glance around the map is a huge step up over the original game's camera controls. Iron Guard didn't offer quite enough innovations or quality to make it something I really recommended, but putting it into VR easily nudges the game over that line. 8 out of 10. Stadium Renovation First Touch. It's another cleaning and rebuilding game. How could I possibly say no to it? I know I'm addicted to this genre of games, but it's yet to have a negative impact on my life other than revealing to people that I'm the worst decorator in the world. This particular take on the genre has the player rehabbing old sports facilities. In the case of this demo, a ping pong exhibition room. The cleaning vision function works great, instantly highlighting all of the work that remains to be done without some kind of a contrived cooldown limitation on its function. This demo has me extremely curious about the finished product. Just how big of a stadium are we going to be renovating? Will this game involve reseeding fields? Repairing retractable domes? I can't wait to find out, and of course, this gets a I finished it out of 10. Townsmen VR. For me, VR city builders are always going to be living in the shadow of Dino Frontier. What can I say? Cowboys and dinosaurs with tower defense style boss fights were an unstoppable combination. While Townsmen doesn't live up to that incredibly high bar, it's no slouch. The concept is accessible enough. The player has to guide their tiny townspeople through building facilities on a series of successively larger islands, with each new location dropping in new complications and facilities to keep the player interested. The controls work great and moving around the world is a snap, but I was flummoxed by the lack of a speed control button. Or if there is one, the game's failure to let me know how to use it. At a certain point in every game like this, the player is going to have assigned all of their characters to their jobs, and it becomes a game of waiting for them to complete those tasks. A speed up button is all that separates the great games from the tedious. And sadly, Townsmen falls into the latter category too often. If there is in fact a way to speed up the action, or if one is added later, feel free to knock this score up by a point or two, but for now, it's a 5 out of 10. Chronicles of Forgotten Tears. A fairly standard fantasy adventure erotic visual novel, Chronicles of Forgotten Tears is most notable for its slightly odd pacing. I know that this is an early access game, but in the 2 hours I played there were plenty of girls to date, which I understand is the point of course, but almost no forward momentum in the plot. According to the menu, I've seen almost half of the game's content, and I have yet to leave the inn where the main character is waiting for a chance to get on a boat to take him to the foreign nation where he's going to start learning about his mysterious past. The strange part? According to the achievements, the rest of the current version of the game is going to be set on that boat? I'll say this, the writing is solid and the characters seem interesting enough. I even had a good time with the card combat system, which is deep enough to require thought about deck building, but not so fiddly that it drove me away from the rest of the game entirely, as has happened so often in the past. If they finish the second half of the game later this year, as the Steam page promises, I'd be interested to see how things wrap up. 7 out of 10. Blink. A deeply chill minigame compilation, Blink in the Vacuum of Space gave me grade school flashbacks to playing really simple titles on the Commodore 64. After a brief sequence establishing the plot, a clumsy robot spills some monsters all over a station and the player has to clean them up. The game starts in earnest, with the player moving from one job to another as they keep the station running, while also trying to vacuum up the little green slugs that have spread all around. The minigames are satisfying. Growing plants and cleaning teeth are especially cute, and enjoyable enough that I found myself forgetting that I was supposed to be, focusing on the monsters. 2 notes of varying caution. 1. This game was clearly intended for children, as the world is far too short for me, and I frequently had to bend down to interact with things. I will search the settings for a floor height adjuster, but I can't guarantee that is a feature it offers. Secondly, the game was designed with the neurodivergent in mind. It's built around accessibility and letting players engage with the game at their own pace. No time limits, no loud noises, there's even a button on the player's virtual wristwatch that can instantly teleport them to a chill room where everything is white, there are no hard edges, and soothing music plays constantly. A deeply nice game, which I can recommend heartily, even if I'm not personally going to be finishing it myself. 6 out of 10. Raifu Wars. This virtual board game couldn't be less my speed if it tried to be. Here are the basics. The player moves around the board, shooting at enemies and capturing territory. The more territory you have, the faster you collect stars, which are both needed to play bonus cards and level the characters up. Leveling up being how you win the game. Combat is performed via percentage checks based on range and whether the other player is in cover or not. And killed players need to roll a specific number to respawn. Sorry if I'm not giving a lot more detail, but I'm not a board game person, and it's not like the game is offering interesting presentation to make up for the uninspiring gameplay. I sincerely doubt I'll be coming back for more of this. 2 out of 10. Kawaii Slime Arena. This arena shooter is as basic as it gets. A cat girl shoots slimes with an assault rifle, earning a paltry amount of experience to upgrade her rifle at the end of 20 waves. Things are enlivened a little by mid-mission perks that unlock every few waves, but fundamentally the game just doesn't have enough variety to hold my attention. I went through 5 stages of fighting the same enemies over and over again, and while it was nice seeing a few boss slimes, the prospect of gradually upgrading rifles just wasn't enough to keep me playing. Oh, and new rifles start out with terrible stats, so every time you get one you basically have to go back to level 1 and start the whole game over, which just makes everything feel way too grindy. 3 out of 10. Jump Challenge. I'm a bigger fan of rage games than I probably should be, which means there's a lot of frustration in my game playing time. So it's always nice when someone puts out a new spin on the genre, trying to make it a little more accessible without removing any of that precious frustration, of course. Like my beloved That Flipping Mount. Jump Challenge has a neat twist on the charge and jump game. Instead of standing still and jumping using set angles after charging, the player's jump height is determined by how much momentum they have when they hit the jump button, and they can even exert limited control over their jump angle while in midair. It takes a little getting used to, but I quickly got the hang of the new jump system and wound up having a great time with it. Also, how charming is the screen that comes up when you try to pause the game? 7 out of 10. Dead Man's Diary. Years after a nuclear war, things started to get a little tight inside the bunkers. So the survivors start holding lotteries to determine who gets to stay inside. Fortunately for the losers, they don't just get shot, but rather moved a few dozen miles away by helicopter, far enough, ideally, that they won't be able to find their way back to the bunker. That's the situation the player finds themselves in at the start of Dead Man's Diary, which begins like it's going to be a standard open-world post-apocalyptic survival game, but then takes a strange twist half an hour in. After spending a night scavenging a wrecked industrial area looking for supplies to build a camp, jumping at every strange sound and certain that I was being followed by something, the game reveals that it has much stranger and more intriguing ambitions. I won't spoil them here, but suffice to say, I'm extremely interested to go back and play more of the game that shocked me with its audacity. Sure, there are places where it could be streamlined. Maybe let me have a button to quickly check things with a Geiger counter rather than making me constantly put away my flashlight. But overall, it's really intriguing. 8 out of 10. Lofty Quest. The 3D hidden object game. It's such a difficult nut to crack for developers. Finding clever places to hide objects that people will still think to check is hard enough when dealing with a picture. When it's a diorama that players are free to look at from any angle, that's a challenge that few are willing to attempt. We're lucky that developer Devin Wiersma did, though, because Lofty Quest is a charming adventure full of delightful twists and memorable characters. The Minecraft-style voxel worlds look great, and the items are hidden just well enough to make them satisfying. That said, the game has 2 big problems that keep it from being a must-play. The first is the lack of a hint system. This is inexcusable in a hidden object game, and it's worth knocking off a point just because it's missing. Second, and this is a pretty big comfort issue, is that the game is constantly making the world go in and out of focus based on where the cursor is hiding. Having the screen suddenly go blurry is completely unnecessary for the game, and a good way to trigger headaches in people. For instance, me, right now as I'm writing the review, just after stopping playing it because I got a headache. Fix these 2 problems and the game could be a great sleeper hit. But right now, it's just extremely good. 8 out of 10. Split. It's another Portal-influenced first-person puzzler, although that might be a little reductive. The gameplay is a bit closer to the maze-focused design of the Cube series, although without the physics puzzles. Now that I think about it, there's a lot of games about stepping on pressure plates to open doors. Anyway, In the place of all those mechanics is a clone swapping and time rewinding mechanic that works like a charm. Need a button pressed to open a door? Simply leave a version of yourself on top of it. Fall off a cliff? Rewind until you're back atop it. The powers can even be combined, with the player creating a clone that walks a path that they previously traveled in order to hit certain checkpoints at particular times. The plot concerns a technician who has to be uploaded into a city's defense grid to make sure that it isn't destroyed by a hostile nation's hacking. Or at least that's what the player is told. I'm only about an hour into the game, and I'm interested to see how this all plays out, which means that this deserves at least an 8 out of 10. That's it for this week's games. Thanks for watching. I will see you back here when I've played some more games, but until then I'll say that's right. Au revoir.